All right, so I welcome everyone to QuickBooks Desktop Custom Reports for Power Users. So we are, it's implied on the topic here that this is a mostly QuickBooks Desktop audience. I'm sure a few of you, or maybe a lot of you, are using QuickBooks Online, but we will not be discussing QuickBooks Online, mostly because about 80 to 90% of what I'll be showing you cannot be done in QuickBooks Online, which is one of the reasons that I am a huge, super duper QuickBooks Desktop fan. Anyway, I want to thank Avalara for sponsoring the webinar. Avalara is a very large company that deals with sales tax. They do built-in software to QuickBooks Desktop and Online, and they also have a platform for filing sales tax. If you have any clients that do multi-state sales tax or have any sort of complex sales tax issues, talk to Avalara. They're great for that. All right, let's go right into the content. Let me introduce myself. I'm a CPA. I work and live in Miami, Florida. I have a master's in taxation and finance, and I've been using QuickBooks for about 15 years. I teach QuickBooks in a classroom that I have down here in Miami. I teach a little bit of Excel as well. Excel is another one of my passions. And there's my email address. I'm pretty good at answering emails. I have 50 to 60 emails I get per day from people because I make my email public. So I'm all day long answering emails. So if it takes me a week or so to answer, just don't feel offended. But I do answer my emails, and people send me questions and stuff about QuickBooks all the time. I would love to see if I can be a resource to you. Anyway, the learning resources are going to be simple. First, we're going to talk about source and destination, or otherwise called targets. This is the fundamentals of QuickBooks reporting. I'm going to make the assumption that we have power users here. However, if we don't know source and destination, we're going to have a tough time getting through custom reports. That's the most simple part. Then we're going to do a deep dive into customization. We'll talk about what fields are available, what are the different options you have for customizing. And what I would like to give you, this is more of a personal teaching objective, is I would like to give you the tools that you would need if a client comes to you and says, hey, I need a report that does XYZ, that you right off the bat have a resource to say, well, yes, it can be done, or no, it cannot get done. And then you don't waste time trying to build something that cannot be done in the first place, or maybe something that needs a third-party app, something like that. All right, so we're going to cover 5 topics. We're going to go through source destinations or targets, and that's placed with a filter called detail level. We're going to talk about the type of reports that are available in QuickBooks Desktop. Then we're going to do a couple of examples of customizing canned reports and building custom reports from scratch. Then if we have time, the last 2, that's kind of bonus. This is probably about a 2-hour presentation. I'm going to try to cram into 1 hour. So if I do speak a little fast, I apologize. I'm trying to give you as much content as possible, and hopefully you can watch the recording afterwards. So those 2 extra, if we have time, we'll talk about the paid status filter, and we talk about combining or doing consolidation of reports in QuickBooks Desktop. Source and destination. Now think about the word destination, the word target, and the word split. Think about those 3 words: destination, target, split, as 3 words that are interchangeable in the concept of QuickBooks. Okay, so any point in time that you're reading anything that's kind of geeky about QuickBooks Desktop and you see the word destination, target, or split, they're probably talking about the same thing. For now, I'm using destination as the term, and then source is just the payee or the account where the transaction's coming from. So we'll talk about those, and then we'll understand through that how QuickBooks fills in missing data. So we'll discuss that. And then we'll jump right into the detail level field, and we'll talk in detail about all the available fields. So first, what you're seeing here is a check. Now, what you see in blue, it's what's called the source. In some cases, the word source is interchangeable with the word header or the word summary. I apologize that I had to use multiple terms. The problem is that QuickBooks is not consistent with the terminology. So source, header, summary, that's going to be all the data fields you see sort of in the top of the transaction. And then we got our destination, detail, split, target. Those are the ones that are going to be on the bottom of the transaction. Now, it's not always top and bottom, but it's very often the case. So think about, the most important one is think about the memo. Why does this matter? Well, this matters a lot, specifically because of the memo. And then I'm going to show you with an example, because by showing this with an example, it's extremely clear. So what I'll do is I'm going to run a check real quick. And I want you to just kind of take a look at every field that I'm using here. So I'm going to write a check for this vendor called Vendor One Corp. The check will be for $6,000. And on the memo, I'm going to type here source memo. Okay, so I'm typing here source memo, and I'm going to split the expenses in two. I'm going to put, let's say, $4,000 in advertising, and then I'll put $2,000 in professional fees. And I'm not going to put anything under the target or the destination memo. Now, this is extremely important. I want you to pay close attention to this, okay? So I'm putting a memo in the top, but I'm not putting a memo in the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And then I'll run a report real quick that will show me the information, the accounting information inside this transaction. So for that, I'm going to hit Control Y on the keyboard, and that's going to bring in the transaction journal. Control Y basically shows me the guts of the transaction and also shows me how this data is being input into our database. So as you see here, memo, it's copied or filled in. If you see the word source memo, and I'm going to zoom this in, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, you see the word source memo repeats itself in the source of the transaction, which is the $6,000. And it also repeats itself in each of the splits. This is the source, the 6,000, 4,000, and 2,000. That's the destination, the target, or the split. So that source memo repeated itself. Now, what happens is I had put a memo in there. Let's say, for example, I put a memo here called split memo. Okay, again, it could be called destination memo, split memo, and then I'm going to leave the second one blank. Let's see what happens here. Once I hit save, and then I'm going to switch over to the same report. Notice that one of my line items has the split memo, and the other line item defaults to the source memo. The reason for this is QuickBooks is programmed that if you don't put anything on the destination, it's going to pass through. It's going to pass through the split. So it's going to grab the data from the source and put it on the split or put it on the destination. So that's extremely important concept, and I'll explain to you specifically why. Let's say, for example, I was running a custom report. So I'm going to go into the reports menu, custom report, transaction detail. And I wanted to run a report for all the transactions that are dated today. So I'm going to hit today and hit OK. And then you're going to see a whole bunch of information. Now, notice that there's a payment at the top. And what I'll do is I'm going to change the date of this check. That way I'm just kind of looking at it isolated. So I just move the 1 day here. And the reason for that is because I don't want any other information to distract us. I want to look at just the one report that shows me my one check. Now notice I have debits and I have credits. Now the reason for this is because of a filter called the detail level filter. Now I'm going to go through the slides, and then we're going to go back to this, and then you're going to see how this whole thing's going to make sense. So this slide right here just shows you the example I just showed you with, what is the source and what is the destination. And then we're going to talk about the detail level filter. So right now, as of now, the report I run has a detail level filter all. We didn't actually change the filter. That's the default state of that filter. It's all. That means it's going to show me all debits and all credits, all positives and all negatives. If I were to change that filter to, let's say, summary only, and I'm going to do an example of that, you're going to see how it's going to take away the detail of the transactions. It's going to take away the destinations, the targets, whatever name you want it to go by. And it's only going to show me the source level of the transaction, the header. And if I change the filter level to all except summary, it's going to hide the source and only show me the detail. Okay, so let's see how that works here with an example. So I'm going to click on Customize Report, top left. Then I'm going to go into the tab for filters, and then I'm going to search for this one called Detail Level. So once I click on Detail Level, notice that it's under all. That's the default state, and that's showing me debits and it's showing me credits. If I do Summary only and I hit OK, I only get the source. Now, what's the challenge with showing source only transactions? Well, the challenge with source only transactions is going to be that if you have a split, that means you have more than one line on the transaction itself, that split column you see there is not actually going to show me the account that we used, right? So the expense account is actually ignored in this case because there's more than one line. So if that wasn't the case, and I'll show you real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this check, and I'll create a second one. I'll create this one for, let's say, 10,000, and I'm not going to split the lines. So what I'll do is I'll just have one line here, one line item by itself, right? So basically this is two separate checks, one for vendor 2 and one for vendor 1, and I want to just kind of show you both. Notice that the one that's $10,000, for example, if I open up the split column, this one actually tells me that it's advertising and promotion. But why did the other one not show up? It's because there's no way for QuickBooks to cram every single account that is being used there. Therefore, it's going to show the word split. And this is one area that frustrates a lot of people because they get confused about what is it that they're looking at, because, oh, hey, my report just shows a bunch of splits and I have no clue why this is even working. So because of that, it's really important that maybe if you're looking at the expense transactions of a transaction, the expense lines, of a transaction, you can't show a source level in the detail level. You can't show summary only. You're going to have to change it to all except summary. Again, not show the source, not show the header, and only show the details, which would be this option called all except summary, and hit OK. And then you're going to get your splits accordingly. So under the account tab, or the account column, I meant to say, you're going to see every single expense category the way it's supposed to be. However, you may see 2, 3, 4 lines on a specific transaction, and that's another part that tends to confuse people. So in this particular case, I didn't give these checks a check number, but if I were to give it a check number, it's going to be a lot more clear with a check number on identifying that this is in fact the part of the same transaction. So that's how you know that this is part of the same transaction. Okay. Under the same theme, I want to show you something else here. If I go to the edit menu and go to find, and then I go to the advanced find, and then I'm going to go to date, and then I'm going to click today's date, and then I click on find, you're going to find something really, really curious about the way the find filter works. And I'm going to fast forward to the 28th here. What you're going to see is you're going to see a transaction that's bold. I hope that you can see it. It's kind of faint in there, but you're going to see that the first line is bold, and then every other transaction, the font is not bold. And then when you go to the next one, it's bold, and then the font is not bold. Just so you know, when you're in this find screen, bold means is the source, and the one that are not bold means that these are destinations or split or detail level. So that's one way you can quickly identify, if you're in the search screen, identify what is it that you're looking at from this search screen. Now, if I were to use the same detail level filter and I were to hit summary only and I hit find, notice that it's only going to show me the source, and they're both going to show bold. Now, the last thing before I close out of this and go to the next topic is, if you ever start building a report from the find screen, which actually is a good alternative for most people, at least to get started, is once you're done with all the filters, you can click on a button here called report, and this will build a custom report for you, which calls the find report, right? So always remember to change the title of that or something like that before you memorize it. But that's also a really good way to build custom reports. Okay, so let me close out of this, go back to the presentation. And what I'll do is I'll check the questions here. I mean, there's a lot of questions here. I don't know if I can answer all of them. Is there something, Nathan, something that pops out that you think I should be answering? I'm going through the questions. If there isn't, then I'll move forward. Sure. Yeah, no problem. Okay. All right, so let's go to the next. So we'll go to the next slide here. So the other one, and I would say it's another very crucial filter, which is called the account filter with splits. And I'm telling you, I know a lot of consultants, a lot of accountants that have used QuickBooks for years, but they don't even. This is the one filter that they don't touch because it's just very mainly misunderstood. So the account filter allows you to do, it allows you to, and by the way, account filters are almost always going to be for the source unless you specifically tell it that you're open to seeing any of the splits, or maybe possibly not. So I'll show you kind of what that means. So let me go into custom reports. I'm going to go to reports, custom reports, transaction detail. And almost every report that I'll be doing today will be this, right? And then let me put here the date that we were working with. And then I click OK. And then there's all the transactions that I have for today. However, right now I'm seeing debits and credits. I'm seeing transactions like the source of the check, and I'm seeing the destinations. If I were to click on customize report and then click on filters and then click on account, and then in this case, select, for example, all bank accounts, it's going to ask me a question that says, include split detail. This is really, really important. If I hit OK right now and I don't include the split details, this filter is only going to show me what the bank can see as money coming out of it. So you're only going to see, in this case, the source, because most of the transactions that affect the bank are source. Okay, so that's a really, really important piece. Now, if I click on customize report and I go to filter and I hit yes, and I don't tell it which ones I want to see, and I hit OK, I am going to see every one of the splits. However, let's say I wanted to just narrow down to transactions that are sourced from the bank, but the split or the expense category is professional fees. So the way I would do that is, under the same filter, I would put yes, but only for specific accounts, and then I can come in here and put 66770, whatever the name the account is, and then click OK, and it's only going to show that one. So this is actually a really killer combination. You get to choose the source of the transaction and then the type of split that is happening. Now, let me give you a real life case where something like this would come along and where you would have to build a report like this. Let's say, for example, that your client says, hey, I would like to know any bills that I have that affected my fixed assets. So that's a very specific report. And if you haven't done reports for a very long time, that would be something that you would say, I'm not sure if QuickBooks can do something like that, but let's test it. Let me go into vendors and let me click on enter bill, and then I'll create a bill for one of these vendors here. And let's say, for example, that a part of the bill affects my advertising, and then another part affects my, let's put it here, furniture and equipment here. I'll put there 1,000, and I'll hit save. And then I'm gonna create another one here. I'll just do a couple so we have more information, and then we'll affect advertising, and then we'll affect another fixed asset. We'll put here maybe 3,000, and then we hit save and new. And then I'll also do a check that affects my fixed assets. And you're gonna see how this is gonna work. You're really gonna like the way this example works, because I think it's going to clarify things really well. Okay, so right now I got 3 transactions affecting my fixed assets. If you've been working with QuickBooks, maybe not on a really advanced level, but you're very familiar with the reports, the way you would probably go about building a report of fixed assets is by going into the balance sheet and then double clicking on the fixed asset amount right here, the 6,500, double click on that, and then you get a report of all the transactions affecting my fixed assets. But I can do something like customize report, filters, and then I say, okay, what is it that I want to see? Well, maybe I want to see them in a different perspective. Maybe I want to see things that are coming from bills. So the source would be accounts payable, right? So where's all my accounts payable? Right here. And then the split would be, in this case, furniture and equipment. Okay, and then I would hit okay. And that would only show me the bills which are sourced from accounts payable that are affecting my furniture and equipment. Now I could also use the transaction type filter to do something like this, but I have situations on which a client tells me, okay, so I want to know which fixed assets I bought from only these two bank accounts, not from the other bank accounts. And that's when it starts getting pretty interesting, right? Because I can choose the source bank account, or I can choose the source payee or something like that. So these are some practical examples on how the account filter is used, and when you actually choose between source and split destination. Now this chart here becomes really useful, and this is obviously a part of your handout that we included there. This chart here actually tells you, based on the transaction type, what is going to be the source account. So if you're going to work with account filters, not necessarily transaction type filter, this will let you know what is the forced source account on this. The only one, and I didn't include all of them because they got payroll transactions and stuff like that that are more complex, but the only one here in which you get to choose the source account is the journal entry. A journal entry uses the first line as the source account always, and every split line, or every second, third, fourth, every separate line other than the first would then be deemed as the destination or the split account. So this chart becomes really useful for that. And then when you see the detail, the destination account, that is the typical account used. That's not always the account used. For example, in a check, the destination or detail account doesn't necessarily have to be expense. It could be anything really. In a deposit, it could also be anything, but typically we use undeposited funds, etc., etc. So that's kind of like what this little chart, the cheat sheet, does. Now, this report here, this link here from Intuit, I recommend it a lot because it goes through the source target explanation, and this is written, obviously. So if you think I speak kind of fast, it'll be useful for you to print this, and you will have written instructions on pretty much everything that I spoke, plus a little bit more. So I think this is a really useful link for you to use, right? And then I'm gonna go ahead and copy and paste that in the chat box as well, so you have that handy. But for the most part, you should be able to see that in the handouts. Okay. Now let's talk about the type of reports that are in QuickBooks. In this particular case, we did examples of the custom detail report. That's pretty much what the focus was on the detail report. But there's another report which I find it to be probably one of the most useful ones, and I'll call it the biggest money maker, which is the one that most people ask for, which is the summary report. Right? And then we're going to do an example of that, and we're going to talk about that one. We'll probably spend a little bit more time on the summary report. And then we have the specialty reports, or what I call the canned reports. You can also call it the default reports. These are the reports that are already built into QuickBooks that you can run some filters if you want to, that profit and loss, balance sheet, things that are most commonly used. QuickBooks Desktop has about 120 custom reports, so there's going to be plenty of those. And then finally, we're going to have the list reports. So let me show you some examples of that first. So we talked about the detail reports. I'm going to pull them here: reports, custom reports, transaction detail. Okay, that's a detail report that contains line by line, field by field. Then we have the built-in reports, which is anything you see in here that is not under the custom reports menu. So a profit and loss is a default report. The balance sheet is a default report. Sales by customer summary, default report. There's a lot of reports that are there by default. And in some cases, you can modify them in very interesting ways. However, you can't do much beyond of what they're originally built for. So that's what we call by canned reports. But then a very underutilized report type is the list report. That's going to be under reports, list. And the list reports are going to be to pull your database. So to pull an item list, a customer list, a vendor list. And this is really useful. Number one, a customer list, if you were going to do a mail merge and send some mailers or something like that. Or maybe you wanted to do some additional analysis in Excel. There's many things you can do with this, but I'll show you real quick. Under list, we have customer phone list or customer contact list. You can pull any of these, right? And then this is basically my customer database. Now, when I click on customize report, I can actually come in here and choose what data I want to see. So let me just clear the whole thing out here, and then I'm gonna choose what I want to see. So I only want to see customer, I want to see the balance, and I want to see, let's say, first name, last name, main phone number, and then we'll look for the address here, my bill to address, and 5, and hit OK. And so I can basically pick and choose what I want to see in this database. And again, if you don't have any data there, that's not going to be very useful. But the idea behind this is that once you have a customized report on the fields you want to see, you can even resort these. Like I can grab bill 2, drag it to the left and put it right between customer and balance. I can grab bill 2 number 2, grab it to the left, put it right there as the second one. So I have some customizability in terms of, you know, where I want to see these things. And then I can export this into Excel pretty easily, or CSV, and I can even email it to someone. I mean, all this stuff is really useful. Now, one really important caveat or limitation, okay, specifically about list reports. This is a list report. List reports don't have historical dates. So I can't say, give me my customer contact list with the balance total. Notice that this one has a balance total. So let me just grab the balance total and put it here. So give me my customer contact list with the balance total as of last month, as of last year. Once you do a list report, that one doesn't have any date customization. So it's going to be the balance as of now. Okay. So it's the balance as of now, and that's it. Okay. So you can't really choose a date range or a transaction date range when you come to a list report. So a list report is really useful for exporting data for the most part. Okay. Same thing with an item list. Let me show you here real quick. So if I go to list and I go to item price list, for example, same thing. So I can pick and choose, do I want to see the description? Do I want to see the manufacturer's part number? Do I want to see the class? I mean, all these things here, I can choose what I want to see. And there's also some, quantity numbers here. So I can do quantity on hand as well. Okay. Again, I can't backdate this and say how much did I have on hand last week or last month. This is a all dates report, right? When it comes to a list report. So a list report is only to pull data from the database, but it won't do any calculations. Okay, so that's list reports. Okay, so now let's jump into the summary reports, which are the really important ones, because these are the ones that most of the time clients don't really want all this detail. They just want to have a report that helps them, make decisions quickly, right? So this is one of the real important parts of report building, which is knowing the limitations of the custom summary report. So let's deep dive into custom summary reports. So first of all, a summary report, think of it as a grid, okay? It's gonna have rows and columns, a little bit like an Excel file. It's gonna have rows and columns, but there's a limitation. I can only do one dimension in a row and one dimension in a column. So I can't really have sub rows or sub columns. The exception to the rule would be if you're dealing with classes, subclasses, or customer jobs, or items, sub items, you're gonna see those as sub rows. So you're gonna see them split and you can collapse and expand, but you can't really choose a secondary column to pivot by, or a secondary row to pivot by. By the way, I would absolutely love that. That's something that I would kill for. Literally. But you can only get one dimension per row, one dimension per column. Now, one of the things that is really neat, really cool about it is you can get the amount and the quantity in a custom summary report. I found that to be really interesting. And then, if somebody were to ask you, how many of these units I sold in a month, and the total dollar amount, and then maybe want to calculate the average price, you can do this in Excel real easy by getting the data from QuickBooks. Okay, the next slide here talks about the filters. Now, filters they work the same way as they work in a detailed report. However, it's not very obvious what data you're looking at in a summary report because you don't see fields. So you have to be extra careful about the type of information you're putting in the filters, and be extra careful, I would say, for the most part, extra careful on think about whether you're getting the information from the source or the destination. Because if you're not thinking about source and destination, this report, you may get it wrong. Okay. And then the other, okay, that's it for summary. So let me go into a summary report, and let's go into the reports menu, custom reports, summary. Okay. So what you're going to see here is columns and rows. Now you only get about 16 to 12 to 16 choices here. So you don't get every single data field in here. So you get some of them, not all of them. And it's also important to note that day, week, year, quarter, so anything that has to do with dates, it's only on the column section, not on the row section. So let's do some typical summary reporting. For example, columns, I'm going to do it by day, and then rows, I'm going to do it by customer. Just kind of show you. We'll start like that. So I want to see days in the columns, and I want to see customers in the rows. Now I haven't specified what type of information I want to see. So for now, let's just hit OK and see what happens. Okay. So then I got this report that has a whole bunch of data. Okay. Maybe I don't want to see so much information. Maybe I want to just do, instead of by day, let's just do it by week. And then we can kind of narrow down what we're seeing here. I notice that I got some negative numbers, and that basically means that in the context of the filter that I'm using, the net result could be a negative. Now that doesn't always mean that's a credit or a debit, by the way. This becomes a little bit confusing. But I'm going to click on custom reports and go to filter, and then see that what we have here, we have income and expense account. So if I have any sales and expenses, they're going to be netted from here. This is the single most important part about summary reports. If somebody was to say, I want to see my customer activity per week, for example, just to say an example, my customer activity per week, you have to specify, well, what do you mean by activity? Well, sales. Okay, well, if you want sales, then you have to make sure that you run all sales. You can't run income and expenses. You have to run all sales, which in this case, there isn't one called all sales. There's just one called all ordinary income. So then I hit OK. And then this report looks a lot different. So notice that, for example, in this week, we had $4,000 worth of sales, okay, just in this week. Okay, so that's sales. If I double click on any of these, it will take me to a detailed report that shows me the detail behind those sales. Let's look at each of those invoices. So the first invoice was sold to customer B and is using terms that are called terms 1, is using rep H, and is using class AAA. Okay, this will make sense. I'll get there eventually. And then we see the second invoice. Actually, no, this is the same invoice. And then we see that we have terms, we have classes, we have a whole bunch of things going on there. So I wanted to show you the power of that. So let's say, for example, under columns, I were to put total only, and then I wanted to put some additional dimensions in the columns. So if you notice that we had terms, for example, so we can actually group these columns by terms. So if I can come up here and say, okay, I want to see all my sales per customer, but the sales are going to be grouped by term. So whether I have 30 days, 60 days, due on receipt, whatever, I made them very simple. I call it terms 1 and terms 2. Let me make the font a little bit bigger. So we can pivot them this way. So I can have column customers on one side, terms on the other side. What else I can do? Well, I can change terms, and I can put, for example, classes. And then I can have the same report, sales by customer, but then grouped by class or totaled by class. Or I can, instead of doing class, I can do, for example, I can do rep. And again, we have different reps for different sales, and it'll also give me different subtotals. So I just want you to think about the context in which, what is the typical things that customer asks for. Okay, for the most part, people will tell you what they want in the rows. Not a lot of times they tell you what they want in the columns. And a lot of times they tell you, I want totals by this, but you have to ask total what? Total expenses, total sales, total what? That's a really, really important one. Now, there's this one up here called sales tax code. This is particularly important because in some cases, I'm going to take a look at sales tax. In some cases, in one of the kind of deficiencies that QuickBooks has is that people want to see a sales, taxable and non-taxable sales by county, by city, by province, whatever, because different states have different ways that you need to report sales, and sales tax is most of the time linked by county. So if you were to create some tax codes for each of the counties, that you can actually do that. For each of the states, you can actually do that. You can actually start seeing that information in down there. So I'm going to show you real quick what I mean by that. So if I had different tax codes in the sales, and I were to run a report, in this case by tax code, you can see taxable sales and non-taxable sales. So right now we only got two tax codes. We got the taxable and the non-taxable. Right? In some cases there will be something in between, but if you create different tax codes, and you can create separate ones, one for each county even, and you mark some taxable and others non-taxable, you can run a report that gives you this information really simple. And in a lot of cases for sales tax, that's really important. So I just want to give you an example on sales tax, just because Avalara is actually the sponsor, so I guess that makes sense. The other piece is that I really don't have a choice of doing sales by city or sales by state. Those are very commonly asked for, or sales by region, right? I can do by customer, but that's about it. So if you're not using customer, what I want to show you is using something called customer type. So I'm going to do customer type, and then I'll go back here to total, and then hit OK. And then just show you that customer type could be a really useful resource for you to group your customers by any logical region that you may need for reporting, whether it's sales tax or non-sales tax. So I'll show you an example real quick. So I'm going to go into my customer here and go to customer center, and then I'm going to edit one of my customers, and I'm going to go into additional info, and then I'm going to call this customer type, I'm going to call it Broward County. Okay, that's the county that they're in. Okay, in some cases you can go even deeper. What you can do is you can create a customer type called FL, so you can create a state, and then I can do a sub customer type called Broward. Okay, you're gonna see how this is actually really cool, and you don't have to do state, county. I'm just doing an example because that will be useful for sales tax. But there are some cases in which people want to do it for other things, regions, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to show you the example with two states, just to kind of you see what the difference is. So I'm modifying the customer type of these customers, and then we'll do this one, New York, and then we'll put here NYC. Okay, so we'll start with New York first, and then we'll create the sub customer type NYC. Okay, perfect. So see what happens here. Now I run a report by customer type. See how cool this is? I run a report by customer type, which I basically, instead of using the traditional type, right? I'm actually using the states. Okay, now this is the alternative to working with Avalara. Like if you're working with a third-party tax software, you're not going to change customer types. You let the account software run the whole thing. This is the example of how you would do it if you didn't have specialized sales tax software. So I want to make sure I make that really clear. But this is one of the real common things that people ask for if they're not using any sophisticated sales tax software. Hey, I want my sales by state or by county, and then even I want to know whether it's taxable or not. So notice I can do this fairly quickly, and this is awesome. This tells me what are my taxable sales by state, and I can even now open it up and see taxable, non-taxable by county, by city, whatever your split is. And you can use customer type for different things. Now, a lot of people ask me, Hector, when I do this example, they say, Hector, wait, I thought QuickBooks has a sales by ship date or something like that. Yeah, they do, but I'll show you how that, because it's not perfect, but I'll show you what that report is. That's under the reports menu, and under sales, it says sales by ship to address. And the problem with that is that it's not a summary report. First of all, it's a detailed report, and it's only shipped to address. So let me tell you what that means. Okay, if I have an invoice and I have my bill to address, it's not gonna read it from here. It's only gonna read it from the ship to address. So let me copy this over, because I didn't even put a ship to address originally. So I'm gonna go into each of my invoices here and copy those. Okay, that's copied. And let's look at this one. I have to copy that over. Okay, because that's, again, as the report suggests, that's based on ship to address. But the way it does it is it breaks it down by city. And yeah, I think that's useful, breaking it down by city. But in some cases, you may want to see something wider than a city, like an area or a county. And unless you're actually overriding the city name with the county's name, this is not going to work. So it's really cool, really neat. I like this report that QuickBooks gives you by default. But I like using customer type if I wanted to really to show summaries and totals, because in many cases that's what people ask for. Okay, let's see. We close that and close that. All right. Let's go through the questions, see if there's anything else that people are asking for. Can you run a report of sales by state by using the ship to address? Paula, not possible. Not possible. The only possible way for you to pull that off is using customer type. Not with the QuickBooks report. Now, let's just go through that notion real quick, just because I wanted to answer that one. Paula's question was, I want to run a report by state using the default reports, but using ship to address. So let's say, for example, that this wasn't Florida. I'm going to put here New York. Okay. And I'm going to put here New York as well. So the way you would be able to do something like this, and this gets a little bit tricky, is I can't run it by state, but I may be able to filter it by state in this case. So I'll go to customize report, and I'm going to go into filter, and then I'm going to look for state. Let's see if we got something like this here. I got the name state, but that's not shipped to. I may not be able to get shipped to. I got no. So I can't get ship date on this report, unfortunately. So that's a limitation of that QuickBooks has right now. I can't get the ship to here. So I could do by name. So in this case, if I go by name state, and I basically say, hey, I only want me to show me New York. That's part of the bill to address in this case. It would narrow that down, which in this case it's not what we have here. But no. So just to clarify that question, no, you can't. You're gonna have to do something fancy in Excel or something like that, or again, use the classes or use the customer type in this case, different ones to run the states. And somebody was asking me about changing the size of the font in a report. So what I do is I just right click on the report. So I click on the right mouse button, and then this little window pops up, and then I'll be able to change the font. A lot of people don't know that. So I can change the font, I can change the size, and it changes it on the report. Now, one of the questions I have is, hey, I love this. I like the zoomed in reports. How do I make sure that shows up all the time? So in the edit menu and preferences, down here where it says reports and under company preferences, there's a place called default formatting for reports. If you actually uncheck that and click on format, I can actually choose what font and size I want by default. So let's say by default I want it 14 and I want it whatever, this weird font that's here, and hit OK. By default, every one of my reports is going to show up that data. So let me show you. I'll pull up a profit and loss and see by default I get this weird unreadable font that I just chose. So if you want a default font and size, go to the edit preferences, uncheck default formatting, and then go into report data and choose whatever font you want. Obviously choose something that it's readable, of course. And you can change the font of pretty much anything in here. Okay, so that's a custom summary report. If you have any other examples you would like for me to do, put them there on the chat. Okay, let's see what else we got here on the slides. So okay, so that's another really important one, transaction detail. So let me go back into the transaction detail report. I'm gonna go to reports, company financial, reports, custom reports, transaction detail. Okay, and then I'm gonna click on all and hit OK. So basically what I'm seeing here, it's every single transaction, and make the font smaller now because now I can't read the whole thing. So I got every single transaction that I have used. Okay, so you see every single transaction that I have used, and there's a really valuable piece here, which is the total by. So I'm gonna right click real quick and let me put a decent font in here. Playing with fonts typically end up screwing things up. Okay, so what I can do is I can group these by right here where it says total by. So I can group them by year, by month, by day, by week, right? So that allows me to group together, and also the grouping itself is going to do a sum. So I'll be able to know my total debits, my total credits, and the running balance. So that's what's nice about it. I can group it by customer. I can group it by payee. I can group it by rep. Now, something that's really important in this one, people always ask me, what's the difference between grouping by customer and grouping by payee? So for example, if on the check itself, I'm paying, where's my check here? If on the bill itself, on the check itself, I'm paying the vendor, this is my payee, vendor 2. But if I select a customer here in the bottom, let's do customer A, and then I'll hit save and close. If I'm grouping these by payee, I'm still gonna see the check under the payee section, right? But if I group it by customer, the customer part is gonna search not only on the source name, but it's also gonna search on the job costing part. So when you group a transaction by customer, it could include expenses. See how there's a check here inside of my customer grouping? It's because the total by customer will include source transactions, which are invoices to customers, and also split that were job costed to customers. Whereas if I select by payee, that's going to show up also on the vendor side. That check will also show up on the vendor side. So that's a kind of an important note about the difference between customer and payee. So that's basically the groupings that you have there. So let me show you that resource I was talking about, because we're about to be finished, and as I suspected, we probably weren't even going to be able to get to the whole thing. Probably got to about 70% of it. So if you click on that link that's there, if you go to that link, bit.ly/QB custom reports, all in uppercase. If you go to that link, that's going to go into a Google Sheets that I created. Okay. This Google Sheet contains every single field that is available in a report. Okay, customer job, customer type, vendor, payee, and then it tells you whether or not it's available as a row, as a column in the custom summary, or if it's available as a field, total by, or filter. And this report, the first time I ever make it public. This is an internal report that I use for my own custom report building. I have this printed out. My customers are drawing a report for me, and I'm going through the fields and kind of thinking about, well, can I build this report for you? Is this even doable? Or am I going to need a third-party app of some sort? So when we start drawing, sketching the report and start thinking, well, what do you want to see in row? What do you want to see in column? We go with what's in here, and I will know whether or not I can achieve it. And I would have to know up front whether it's going to be a custom summary or custom detail. But what's really nice about this is if you actually hover over any of these, you're going to see the explanation of what every one of those filters are. So that's a little note that I put in there. So if you also need to do that, and if you print this, all the notes print with it. So this will be like maybe like a 10-page report or something like that if you want to include all the notes. And it also tells you the data field type. So it tells you whether or not it's a drop down, whether it's a choice, whether it's free text. And then I add some notes next to it. So it's not complete, not everyone has a note. So I'm telling you, this resource is extremely powerful. If you think I'm missing stuff or if you want to make corrections, just email me, right? Because this is a resource that I would like to crowdsource to get better and better. But this thing, in my opinion, is about 90% there. And by the way, I included a static version of that on the slides. So you would see on the slides that there's a couple of pages with that information, but using the link will help you, in my opinion, because I'll be adding stuff to that. And I think I'll be having some people that will give me feedback. Now, at some point, I'm not even going to make this public anymore. I'm gonna make it go away. So I recommend that you save it, download it, print it. At some point when this thing is finished as a crowdsource, this will be an internal source only. This is kind of like my edge that I have over other consultants for building reports. I mean, it takes me half or a third of the time to build a report just because we build that information. So consider that a gift. And again, don't share it outside this group because I'm probably going to take it down in not too long. Now, there was a couple of slides here that I couldn't cover, and I only got about a minute left, so I kind of have to choose what I want to cover now. So real quick, advanced options. Don't overlook the advanced options. That's a little button that says advanced. This can modify open balance dates, which is really, really crucial. So that's what this slide was all about. This slide was about the preferences, which I show you real quick. Now, when you think about any reports that are by sales, you're tracking sales, customer job, class, and customer type are key, but don't discard the fact that job type, ship via, and terms is there as a drop down, and that this could also be creative ways that you can run reports with different dimensions. And there's a couple of notes here on different reports you can build. The really most important one here is called open balance, paid, unpaid filter. That's a really important note. And then these links here are really useful. I got about 4 or 5 videos on my YouTube channel that are about customizing reports, so that will cover a lot of the stuff that we didn't get to cover today. I also have a series of videos about combining reports. So as we expected, it wasn't going to be enough time. I also have a slide on my favorite apps that have to do with reports and consolidating reports, and I wanted to leave it open for questions. Now, this webinar, in my opinion, should have really been a 3-hour webinar because there are so many things with reports. The problem is, you advertise a 3-hour webinar, people don't show up. Nobody really wants to. At least the thought of spending 3 hours on a webinar is not something that people think about. But through your feedback, and obviously if we can get sponsors, if Avalara wants to keep sponsoring power user webinars, we'll know pretty much what are the topics that people want to see. But I mean, do download those slides because a lot of the stuff I didn't get to cover, it's already pre-recorded. I already pre-recorded a lot of these things. So go into my YouTube channel and watch those videos and email me. If you got questions, email me. If the question's too complex and I can't answer it via email, I'll be honest. I say, look, I can't answer this question, too many moving parts. But if it's something that I already have a video for, I'll definitely post a link to a video. Okay. All right. I think, that's it for me.